Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Civivi Knives Brigand, or Brigand, I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly how people like to pronounce it. It's probably the same difference between me saying integral and integral. But anyways, this is another super compelling knife from Civivi. Anybody who's not familiar with Civivi, check them out. This knife will be linked right down in the description, and then also in the Amazon store that I always mention, there's literally an entire section dedicated to Civivi knives. They've brought some of the absolute best designs to the knife world in general, and specifically the budget knife world. Very few out there will tell you that, you know, Civivi knives are not worth the money. They absolutely, in my opinion, are. And this one has a lot of additional, you know, just more compelling reasons to check out this knife and the Civivi brand in general. We're going to talk all about it. This knife was sent to me by my good buddy Lavender Pants 86, one of my favorite Instagram tags to say out loud. I've said that many times. Give this guy a follow. I just looked on Instagram just a second ago and he's got like 65 followers. That guy definitely deserves more followers. He's it's not the first time he's been involved with this channel. So thank you so much, Lavender Pants. I'd also like to say thank you to all of my generous patrons supporting me right now. This is kind of a crazy time, and it just blows my mind that people are still willing to support me. So thank you so much. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, check out the link in the description. Anyways, let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. I cannot set this guy. See, like it wants to reflect the darkest part on the blade. Aesthetically, that bothers me. We're coming in at just a hair shy of 8 inches. I mean, some people might call it, we're going to call it like 7.8 inches overall. Blade length coming in an absolute 3.5. Your cutting edge coming in at about 3 1/8 because of the very generous forward choil area. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptiliator, in this case the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. So you can see there, super duper close. We've got a different handle length, but the blade length, you know, the ratios are just different on this guy, but the overall length is very, very similar. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 coming in at 7.25 inches overall. How's the action on this guy? Well, like pretty much all other Civivis that I've ever handled, well, there's a few on washers, I guess, but this guy's on bearings. It is ridiculously smooth. Truthfully, I mean, I'm not blowing smoke here. This is one of the smoother Civivis that I've handled. Now, that's not to say that there are Civivis that are not smooth and Civivis that are smooth, but for whatever reason, I mean, maybe this is just thoroughly broken in, but this is nice. I mean, Civivis don't traditionally have thick blades, but this guy's got the thin blade, and it's not a massive blade, but it's just really, the knife just kind of does the work for you. It takes a little tiny bit of encouragement, but what's surprising to me is the lack of any noticeable friction in there. I always talk about the difference between a fall shut action, it's kind of on a budget knife, and it's got a little bit of friction, you know, machine parts that you can feel in there, the bearings kind of rolling against rough surfaces on the inside of the knife, right? This is almost frictionless and just takes a little bit of encouragement. It's really nice. On top of that, we have, surprise, surprise, a flipper tab that is nicely shaped, a detent that is nicely tuned. I mean, everything is just fantastic. I'll give you a look at the actual detent there. Click. That's what I like to see. Absolutely. Next up, let's do carry profile. So this isn't an overly thick knife. Blade stock's very thin, but you can see the thickness on the knife itself. Getting it lined up exactly, just ever so slightly thicker all the way around than the Spyderco Para 3. In terms of height, you can see here up against the PM2 and Para 3, two knives that have awkward carry profiles nobody ever seems to complain about. Height, even though it does have a flipper tab or a pocket pecker, whatever you want to call that, it's just not taking up nearly as much room in the pocket as either of these guys. You can see there by length, we're looking at a very similar overall length to the Para 3, and height, it's definitely shorter than both the PM2 and Para 3. So like I said, despite that, that little flipper tab there, it's really not going to bother you too much. It's like I always say, if you don't carry anything else in your knife pocket other than your knife, then the flipper tab doesn't matter anyway. But even if you are carrying some other things, this is going to be pretty friendly all the way around. Let's go ahead and do the hardware check, something I always forget to do early on in the episode, get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, 2 items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them both down in my Amazon store by pulling it open and then pulling open the section that says knife maintenance near the bottom. Let's go ahead and put that T8 in there because I am fairly certain that the body screws, yep, both body screws and the pivot are likely T8. And the only T6 on here looks like it's probably the pocket clip screws, which I always give a pass to because you don't necessarily, you know, have to constantly be, well, you would have to take that off though, I guess, to take the rear scale off, but would you have to take the rear scale off? Yeah, you would because it's on this side. So there are T6 screws on the pocket clip. You guys know what I say. You know, Civivi's pretty good about this. Their body screws are all T8. So if you need to make adjustments to your knife, right, the screws that you're going to be making adjustments to, probably the pivot most often, then body screws, and then if you're going to go full disassembly, you're going to take the pocket clip off. So it kind of sucks that you still have to deal with T6 screws, but it's not that big of a deal. I always give praise to Civivi for at least doing their body screws and pivot in T8, so that's nice. What else? Did we get through everything in this first part? I think we did. So let's talk about the anatomy here. So what we're looking at is G10 that has some heavy chamfering on the outside. It kind of gives it that, it's like, well, the shaman's not down here. It's not quite full contouring, right? But when you do heavy chamfering, right, and then you end up with the flat on the top, it almost gives the illusion of it in your hand, right? If I were to close my eyes and pick this up, I go, oh, nice, it's contoured, but it's not, right? But this is a nice way to do that. We have a little bit of texturing right here. This is G10. It comes in tan, green, black, right, run-of-the-mill colors. I've seen Civivi, you know, mess around with some different colors, and I don't know if this is one of the ones where you can get it in like blue and whatever. Civivi's finally doing stuff in like the jade, the natural G10. I love the light blues, the grays, the jades and all that. I think you can get the, I don't know. I might be wrong. I'm going to say for sure it's black, OD green, and the tan. I would love to see jade, blue, gray, all those, you know, colors that we don't see as often, but this is fine. What I really like about this is the shadow boxing. You see the liner sticks out just a little bit, and it adds a nice aesthetic touch to this knife. We have a very simple, right? We have a little bit of an exotic blade shape here. We've got a very simple profile, and this just adds to it just a little bit, and I like that. That's why I like shadow boxing. So anyways, the texturing here is about medium. It's definitely not going to be a texturing that's going to tear up your pants like some of the Spyderco peel ply texturing. It's nice and going to provide real grip. We do have a satin finished D2 blade. I don't know, it doesn't say it. Does it say it anywhere? Oh, it does, right there. D2. Other than that, the blade is completely sterile, and that's another thing that I appreciate about Civivi knives. They know that people know what they are, right? The only branding is actually on the pivot, which in my opinion is a nice place to put that, right? The entire knife is just, it's just like, we know, we bought it, and they know that we know, so they leave everything off the blade, and the blade looks nice. It doesn't look like a big billboard staring you in the face as you go down the freeway, right? It's really, really nice. So the blade style here, what would I call this? I think initially I wanted to jump to Wharncliffe, but I almost want to call this a clip cliff because it looks like a clip point blade. It looks like a Wharncliffe blade that's been modified with a clip point blade. And I don't know, maybe there is actually a name for this specific blade shape. If there is, I don't know it. I do like how it looks though. It's very aesthetically pleasing. We do have a flat that carries, about 50% down the length of the blade. Now remember, we don't have an overly thick blade. So let's go ahead and measure this here real quick. Zero her out. And actual blade stock thickness coming in at, am I on the flat, 114 thousandths. Let's try again just to be sure. 114, 115 thousand, something like that. So it's not super thick to begin with, which is great because, you know, well, I wouldn't call this a tall blade, but you can see there where it drops off the flat, it gets down super thin. I mean, this is typical of Civivi, right? We're aware by now that Civivi makes a good product. They flip. They've got tuned detents. They've got blade materials and handle materials that people like. They've got good ergonomic designs, and they generally come down to a thin, performance-oriented cutting edge, and that's great. This is going to cut. Something that I will offer as a kind of a, you know, something to be cautious about is that because of the nature of where the flat ends and the taper down here, you can see that the tip gets super thin, and there's not a lot, because this is a clip point, not a traditional, you know, Wharncliffe, like straight angle or sort of curved angle, right? It gets really thin really quickly. So what you end up with is this little teeny tiny thin tip that's honestly, I mean, we'll put it up against the Spyderco tip. The Spyderco tip looking almost a little more robust, maybe it's the light, I don't know, but this is a thin tip. Now I know most people don't need to be told, you know, don't stick your knife in somewhere and pry, but really I would say be careful with this guy. V2's tough steel. Even if this were 3V, I would say, yeah, that's kind of a needle tip, right? Let's be careful with that when we're cutting. But yeah, the actual edge, nice and thin. I mean, that thing's ready to go. And did I mention I love the forward choil in this guy? Truthfully, when I saw this knife, there we go. That's how I should have been laying it down this whole time. The first time I saw this knife, I went, oh yeah, yep, absolutely. That's going to be a home run. That looks beautiful. And you know, handling it, it's one of those knives where I was pleasantly surprised for it to be pretty much exactly the size and feeling that I thought. Oh my gosh, we didn't weigh it. That's something I missed. I knew I was missing something. So we are looking at, on the inside, we'll get back to that. On the inside, we are looking at milled out steel liners, not super thick G10. Weight's coming in at a totally reasonable 3.74 ounces, which is about a 1/4 inch less. If you're going by weight to blade length ratio, it's a 1/4 ounce more than it is long in blade. So that's fine, right? The weight mixed with the carry profile is going to be just fine. If you're a Benchmade bug out or mini bug out type of person, or a Para 3 lightweight type of person, perhaps this might be a little heavy for you. But for, you know, the vast majority of the knife community, this is going to be just fine. It's a little bit more aggressive than a knife you might carry to a cocktail party, but I mean, this is a knife that I would carry about my person in pretty much any scenario. It fits into a variety of roles, as many Civivi knives do. But anyways, what were we talking about here? Oh yeah, let's talk about ergonomics. So the forward choil here, I was talking about the aesthetics of this knife. Immediately I thought, simple handle, we've got heavy chamfering, we've got shadow boxing, so you've got the aesthetics mixed with the nice ergonomic design, and then we have this nice generous forward choil, which Civivi seems to know how to do. I can get my second knuckle in there without really feeling like I'm risking running my finger up on the blade, and then they've got the jimping in the right place, and it's also nicely knocked down, so it's not tearing my fingers up. The edges are also nicely knocked down. It's not pulling my fingernails off or anything like that. As something I usually say, now some people really like the satin finish on the blade. Truthfully, I would really like to see Civivi explore a tumbled finish. CJRB is also a company that's in the budget line. This is the Agave, and they are doing a tumbled finish on their $35 to $40 knives. I would love to see that on some Civivi knives. I think I'm right. I don't know 100%. I think it's actually less expensive from a manufacturing standpoint to put a satin belt finish on a blade like this than it is to put it through a media tumbler. I don't know that for sure. Maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. But again, we're looking at, you know, CJRB, who's essentially using the same materials, not quite the same quality as the Civivi knife, but they're doing it. I would like to see it maybe sometimes as an option. Perhaps there are Civivis out there with tumbling, but who's with me? Would it be nice to see a tumbled finish on this blade in contrast with this this scale? I mean, you know, scratches show up so much easier on a satin finished blade. This knife is meant to be used. It's going to be used, right? It would be nice to have a finish that might hide some of those scratches. That might just be me though. And truthfully, that's just an aesthetic thing. Most people who are going to use their knives don't really care if there's scratches or fingerprints on the blade. But as you can see here, I'm demonstrating by wiping the blade off with my shirt that it is something that I care about. But anyways, ergonomically, yes, all the way around. I mean, arguably a slight hot spot with the pocket clip. We'll talk about that here in a sec, but everything's in the right place. This is a super comfortable knife. And also the flipper tab has been nicely knocked down, so it's not super pointy or anything like that. And even during use, excuse me, I bumped the camera. We do have the jimping right here, but truthfully, it's really not digging into my finger. I honestly think I could use this for a while before it really started to get irritating, so no issues there. We have a nice cutout here, nice access to the liner lock, which is of course great. No double clutch. It's plenty past the detent ball once it gets to that point. No detent ball ramp, but it does pass pretty easily over the detent ball, so I don't really have an issue with it. Moving down here, we've got the 2 body screws, which is nice. G10 backspacer and 2 more body screws. That's honestly the setup I prefer. It's minimal parts. It's going to hold the knife together, and it's plenty strong. We have a lanyard hole that is there, but it is not being prioritized over the pocket clip. The pocket clip is being prioritized. They've done this almost perfectly, in my opinion. We've got a nice, strong, deep carry clip. We've got 2 screws that are recessed. I would have liked to see it a pocket milled in, but there's no play, right? People don't like that because they don't like to see the pocket on the other side. The pocket makes sure that there's no play in the pocket clip, where they cut like a slot in for this to sit in. I always like to see that. I don't take points away because I can understand why people don't like it. But there is a position, by the way, speaking of that, for left-handed carry, even though this is a right-handed liner lock. Left-handed people, I mean, I'm not left-handed, and I find these knives super easy to manipulate either way. So left-handed people can still enjoy this knife. And then the other side is much the same, except you have the pocket clip and you have the adjustment side for the pivot. The only thing I don't like about the pocket clip is the same thing that I don't like about the pocket clip on any Civivi knives, and that's that it has what I call kind of a duck bill. Those stick up a little bit. They do catch things. They will bend out. If it bends it out, no big deal. You just take the clip off and you bend it back, but they can catch and break off. I've had that happen way too many times. It just bothers me. I always bring this up. The MXG deep carry clip is one of the most perfect pocket clips in existence. The way that it has the slight rise and the scoop, it's tall enough to get over your pants, but it's just enough. If you're wearing jeans, heavy duty pants, skinny jeans, if you're wearing sweatpants, you're wearing athletic shorts, it's just right. This is a little bit in excess. It'll get over the pants, but it'll also grab everything that you walk by. So not that big of a deal. So anyways, what are the things that I like and dislike about this knife? Like all Civivis, I wish that it had a tumbled blade, but that's an aesthetic thing and it's a personal thing, so no big deal. The pocket clip, again, like all other Civivis, does have T6 screws. I mean, all other Civivis that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. The tip is a little bit thin, but that's part of the blade design, so I can't really count it off for that. And the pocket clip, which is my only real complaint, is a slight hot spot. I mean slight, right? If you're just going to get this out and make quick cuts, no big deal. But I just don't like that duckbill. And I'd always also like to see some more colors available in all of their really popular models. Now, most of what I listed there were little personal complaints that may or may not affect every single person. The pocket clip is something that I can say will likely negatively affect most people at some point if you're going to carry this all the time. But it's still basically a nothing complaint. Truthfully, what we have here is another massive home run from Civivi. And also, despite my little nitpicks, you know, in combination with the look of this knife, I mean, really, it's the look of this knife. We have classic, simple EDC meets the modern demands of today's knife world, looking for a budget knife that's made out of the right materials, right? You know, or the popular materials. But it also has an interesting and slightly unique blade with this slight sort of Warncliffe thing going on. It is a utilitarian blade shape. That tip, though delicate, is going to get into packages or get into, you know, foam or whatever it is that you're cutting just a little bit easier than some other blade shapes. More of the efficiency of an actual clip point, but you still have this nice, you know, cutting belly. And there's a little more material, I suppose, down at the tip than perhaps a classic clip point that might start from back here and really taper towards a thin edge. This is absolutely recommendable. Truthfully, I haven't really come across this Civivi knife other than some of the FRN models that I just didn't like. Pretty much every Civivi model that's been G10 and D2 or something around there, they just know how to do the ergonomic designs. I love Civivi's approach. I love that they're going with like, it's like, this is a handle shape that works. This is a blade shape that seems to work. These are materials people, you know, seem to like. Let's just slightly alter, you know, the overall length, the overall blade length, right? And let's just go with that. And this is fantastic. This is probably my second favorite Civivi knife of all time. I think some of you guys know my favorite Civivi ever is the Praxis. That's actually my favorite budget knife of all time is the Praxis. This knife here, what you're looking at, generally comes in at about $55 to $60, which is it's not a price that I can argue with. Yeah, you should pick this up. Whether you are somebody who just likes Civivi knives and this is not one that you know, have gotten your hands on yet, yes, I can recommend it to you. If you're somebody who, you know, regularly buys really high-end knives, $200, $300, $400, $500 knives, $1,000 knives, and you just want a nice knife that you can carry on your person and you don't really have to care about if it gets beat up or, you know, if you somehow manage to break it, yeah, absolutely, you're going to be happy with this. Or if you're just somebody who's like, the only knife that I've ever owned is a gas station junker and I'm just looking to make the next step into the knife world, what's a good knife to start with? Yeah, this is for you too. There's very few people that I can't recommend this knife to. If you live in a state where they're going to restrict you on overall blade length or deployment method or something like that, then maybe back off of this one. But for everybody else, yeah, pick this up. I'll leave a link right down at the top of the description so you can get your hands on this if you want to. Like I said, there's many colors, and I have an entire section of my store dedicated to Civivi knives if you want to browse all of them. Thank you again, Lavender Pants, for letting me take a look at this. This was a joy, and I've honestly been trying to get my hands on one of these for a while, so thanks. I think that's pretty much all I've got for you today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.